Us now is someone who has spent a lot of time in Ukraine, Michael Bukur. He's a former spokesman for the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and he wrote a New York Times op-ed last week on what Zelensky does next. You heard Donald Trump say that negotiations have already begun, and they discussed, and I'm quoting here, dividing up certain assets. What does that mean to you when you hear that term, dividing up certain assets?
Yeah, good to be with you, Sarah. Well, I can tell you that went over like a lead balloon this morning in Ukraine. I was checking the headlines and people are going, what was just that? Because these assets that have been, by the way, more enumerated in detail by Steve Witkoff, the Middle East envoy, includes the Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the biggest in Europe. It includes ports. It includes what they call the Black Sea Agreement. This, as far as we all know, was never on the table before, especially the nuclear power plant, which has become a very big source of alarm for UN authorities who have been monitoring it. And then in the meantime, the Russians, as you know, have slow-walked under Mr. Putin the proposed 30-day ceasefire agreement. The onus, as I wrote in that op-ed, thank you for mentioning, the onus is on them to accept or reject it. And depending on their reply, we will find out who is the real barrier to peace in this. But just quickly, it's you wake up every morning and you shake your head because it seems the U.S. is providing so many concessions to Russia, including striking off VOA and Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, a whole bunch of other things without much from them in return.
You talked about this is going over like a lead balloon. Donald Trump had said initially that he could end the war in a day. He has now done an interview saying that he was sort of being sarcastic, even though he said it over and over and over again. How long do you think that these negotiations will go on, knowing that Russia has already, broken some of the promises that it made long ago, and Ukraine has no trust in what Russia is saying? So how does this go forward, and how does Donald Trump push it forward?
Yeah, well, clearly it isn't going Ukraine's way, and Mr. Zelensky has said as much over the weekend that Russia is trying to manipulate the process, standard playbook of Russia to spread things out as long as possible. Mr. Putin, as well as most autocrats, don't like to be rushed or pushed into a deal. But this is very, very bad, Sarah, for Ukraine, because, I'm mostly based there. And every day you see these little cracks appearing in the economy or in people's lives. How long can they hold on? And of course, in the meantime, Russia is continuing with its daily bombardment by drones and missiles over Ukrainian cities. And that, to a lot of us, and for sure to Ukrainians, don't appear like the actions of a party interested in peace.
How do you think this call is going to go between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin ultimately?
Well, one thing is becoming clear now. Mr. Trump admires Mr. Putin. I don't think there's any flaw to his subservience to him. Again, I think all of the concessions are going Russia's way and very, very little in return. I mean, to think that the United States has, according to New York Times reporting, has just withdrawn from a multinational group to investigate the invasion of Ukraine, and that includes Mr. Putin. They've just defunded a Yale University lab that investigates the kidnapping by Russia of Ukrainian children. So I think it will be probably a call that Mr. Putin will be very happy with. But it's hard to believe that the United States is giving so much. And if I could add quickly to your previous report on the Houthi rebels, the other gift this weekend from the United States, and this is according to the State Department, is the State Department tipped off Russia that the strikes are going to happen on the Houthi rebels. Russia provides targeting information to these thugs to strike ships in the Black Sea. In the Red Sea. So this is just an unbelievable time and very difficult to predict what will happen with such an unpredictable president who, again, seems to admire Mr. Putin very, very much.
Michael, I'm curious how you see Europe stepping in. If this all kind of crumbles, if these negotiations crumble, and the United States did what it did before, which is taking things away from Ukraine, taking support away, taking intelligence away, taking satellite availability away from Ukraine, What do you see happening ultimately? Will the EU step in, and can they step in place of the United States?
Well, let me make that part clear in capital letters. Words are not enough. It's actions that count. Now, we all know that the coalition of the willing, so-called coalition of the willing, including my home country, Canada, has neglected military spending. So they're in no position whatsoever right now to replace what the U.S. May back away from. However, and big however, is there are things they can do immediately. And I referred earlier to the defunding of Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. This was a bulwark against, Russian disinformation and disinformation from many other autocrats. The Europeans could very, very quickly go in and at least support Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. These are the guys who keep the autocrats honest, including in Ukraine. They've done incredible reporting during the war to point out corruption and things like that. The other thing, of course, is things like intelligence, and then that 35 billion in frozen Russian assets they could move to give that to Ukraine, which has a big budget deficit.
All right. Well, I know that you are heavily invested in this, has spent a lot of time working and being concerned about what you are seeing. And we do appreciate you taking the time, Michael Bosurkiu. Really appreciate your time this morning and giving us some insight into how you think things are going to go when it comes to trying to end this war. Appreciate you.